Okay, welcome back to one of the longest chapters, if not the longest chapter in Matthew chapter 26. And we're not yet halfway through it. But we're going to start this time in verse number 29. This is the end of the Last Supper. Verse 29, Jesus says, after he gives the cup, "But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." I don't know if that was a reference to, I'm going to wait 30 or 40 years until all of you guys who are at this Last Supper are with me in heaven, if that's what he was speaking of, or if he was talking about, the time when he comes back to rule and reign and begin his millennial reign on earth. How he didn't get thirsty in either of those scenarios, I don't know. It's beyond me. Jesus now has a glorified body. Maybe glorified bodies don't need to drink very often, or drink at all for that matter. And so in verse number 30, after singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Well, they were in Jerusalem proper, had to cross the Kidron Valley, go back up to the Mount of Olives. Remember, that's where Jesus gave the Olivet Discourse that we've been talking about. So they're back on the Mount of Olives. And he says, and in the Garden of Gethsemane, by the way. And in verse number 31, "Then Jesus said to them, 'You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, quote, I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered.'" A quote from the little prophetic book, Zechariah. "But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee." And so again, he is in the business of foretelling the future here, and has told them some things already that are going to happen. Now reiterates it one more time. And they figured out at least that something bad is about to happen to Jesus. And so Peter says in verse number 33, Peter answered and said to him, "Even though all may fall away because of you." Now, who do you mean? Even though all these other 10 guys who are still here with us might fall away, I will never fall away. Now, Jesus had just told them they'd all fall away. He said, "You will all fall away." I mean, he just said that a second before. You will all fall away. And Peter says, "You're wrong, Jesus." Even though everybody else will, I will not. And that's a boastful claim. You know the story well enough to know that Jesus was right and Peter wound up being wrong. It illustrates the fact that, a couple of things. It illustrates the fact, I think, first of all, that Jesus knows us better than we know ourselves. Okay. And number two, I think it illustrates to us that a lot of us are like Peter in that respect. In fact, if you keep on reading it here, all the disciples were making that same claim as Peter. Okay, so Peter was not unique in his boast that he would not fall away. He was unique in his boast in saying that even if everyone else falls away, I will not. But all of them said, we're not going to jump ship here, Jesus. We're going to be loyal to you to the end. And so, God knows us better than we know ourselves, but we're more apt to think more highly of ourselves than we ought. We're more apt to think that we're more loyal and devoted than we actually are. And I can certainly speak from experience on my own behalf, saying that is certainly true. How many times have you heard yourself or Christians say, "Well, I love the Lord, and if the Lord told me to sell everything, and move to Africa for the sake of the gospel and be a missionary, well, by God, I'd do that because I love the Lord. If the Lord told me, I'd do that." Well, but then you look at that person's life, or you look at your life and find out what they're not doing that the Lord has told all of us to do that are of much lesser sacrifice than selling everything and moving to Africa to be a missionary. People are saying, "Well, I'd move to Africa if the Lord told me." Well, the Lord told you to go across the street and reach out to your neighbor. Well, I'm willing to go to Africa. Well, are you willing just to go across the street? Are you willing to make the small sacrifices that are part of everyday following devotional aspects, rather, of following Jesus Christ? So I guess I see a lot of me in Peter, thinking more highly of myself than I ought, but the Lord helping me to see myself eventually as he saw me all along. Luke, in his gospel, brings out more detailness and goes way behind the spiritual scenes. And really, his gospel on this account raises more questions for me than it answers. But I can't resist telling you and taking you to Luke in this case because it's so interesting. And it does give us this little tiny peek into the spiritual realm and dimension that we're often scratching our heads about. I know that I am, because I honestly have more questions than I have answers. Even though I read the Bible many times through, studied it for decades now, I have more questions than I think I have answers. So this is over in Luke chapter 22 and verse number 31. Jesus initiates this conversation, and he says, "Simon, Simon," that's Peter, "Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and you, once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers." Now, you won't find that in Matthew or Mark or John. Peter's response is interesting. It's just exactly what we read in Matthew. But he said to him, "Lord, with you I'm ready to go both to prison and to death." And Jesus said to him, "I say to you, Peter, the rooster will not crow today until you have denied 3 times that you know me." Okay, now that's familiar to us. That's found in the other gospel. I think it's found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The whole "deny me 3 times." But this other information behind the scenes that Satan was somehow involved and got permission. What is he talking about there? Well, we're out of time. So I'll see you next time.
HeavenWord 7 is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.